Welcome back, art historians, to the next section of our study of Baroque art. And as we study Baroque art, we want to make sure that we remember the key words there, the appeal to the senses and emotions, intensity, intensity, intensity. We have to remember that it's about making the divine present in the everyday. And we have to remember that for Catholics in Italy, it is a reaction. Excuse me. It is a reaction to the Council of Trent. It's Counter-Reformation. It's about re-energizing the faithful to return to the study of their faith and the belief in their faith. It is about re-energizing the Catholic Church and to bring it back from the sort of the tipping point it was at during when Luther set up the Reformation. And so intense emotion, return to faith. Okay, so here we are at San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, St. Charles of the Four Fountains, if you were going to translate that into English. You're looking at a church that was commissioned by a group of monks called the Trinitarians. And what does that mean, Trinitarian? It means that they're the followers of the Holy Trinity. This church sits on a very, very, very small site. This is a very, very small group of monks, the Trinitarians. They didn't have a lot of money. And so what they did was they got into a contract with Francesco Borromini. And what they did was Borromini said that he would waive his fee to design the church, if the Trinitarians allowed him to build the church to look any way he wanted. And because it was a small group of people and because they didn't have a lot of money, they said, go for it. And so they gave him real artistic freedom here. And that is really, really important because what we get with this is just so much of that Baroque stuff, so much of that intense feeling, so much of that return to your faith. So let's start with St. Charles of the Four Fountains, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. And you're going to notice that the front edge of the church undulates like a wave, right? So here's our first sort of thought about the wave. You're also going to see that the building stops here, right? The facade goes up another 2 stories. It's to make the building look larger than it actually is. It's a sort of an optical illusion to underscore the grandness of the faith, to make it feel bold and strong. It involves lots of ovals, so many ovals, because ovals have sort of that rounded shape. It undulates. That's that word there, that up, down, up, down, up, down here. It undulates like San Vitale. It has that sort of wave thing. This is actually, he took some of the concepts of the undulation from a building called Santa Costanza, which is a 4th century building in Rome, much smaller, not anywhere near on this scale. And he took some of the undulation and put it with this piece. And so what we're looking at is just a beautiful church that is meant to, remember, instill faith, make the Catholics be awed again by their religion. And so when you go into this building, while the outside may not seem like, whoa, when you go into the inside of this building, you really see the Baroque nature of the interior. So, I mean, it's beautiful. Because of the oval up here and the coffering and this skylight, and these lights here, it is like the dove of peace literally floats above you during Mass. The light comes in, the ceiling is so white with all of these circles and crosses that you are brought to, your eye just travels up to it. And if you look at the floor plan, yes, AP, you're required to look at the floor plan. You enter through that undulating entrance, right? And you come into this oval section. It's stunning. And then you come over here and there's, this is like the rooms where the church cloister, this is where the rooms where they would get ready and things like that. And then this is where the chapels are, like a side chapel, radiating chapel. And then this is the altars. The altar's like right here underneath this arch, okay? It's a beautiful interior space. It's tall. It's and what's cool about it is when you look at the facade, it doesn't seem like it's tall, but that dome peeps up back here. He built that little dome entrance, so it peeps up there. Okay, and here, this is a beautiful shot of the interior. So the interior has all of those undulating pieces too, like whoop, 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 like all these beautiful waves. And then this beautiful decoration on the floor echoes that gorgeous decoration above. And it's a small space, so it feels intimate. And when you look at it, you'll see all of the little niches and statues and all the light and everything. You feel surrounded by your faith, but with all of the light that's coming in through all of the windows, it has this just beautiful, overwhelming light. A lot of churches feel kind of dark. This one feels bright. It feels light. It feels airy. You won't have trouble remembering that it's the four fountains because there's that wave. There's a fountain there, there's a fountain there, there's one there, and one other, four fountains. Okay. And when the light shifts depending on when you're there, and it comes in through these four little windows, and it comes down on the statues of the saints, and it comes in straight down on the altar. And he has all of these contrasts of these concave, these parts that are cut out, with convex, the stuff that sticks out. So concave means to go in, and convex means to come out. And so you have like all these great, like these beautiful shapes and all this beautiful light. And Borromini's comment on this church is nature and geometry are inseparable. And so in order to create a beautiful building, you must have both nature and geometry. And so this is an interior section. It's a dark picture, and I hate that it's this picture because the interior really is bright. And it is a beautiful, beautiful building. Why did they pick this? Because I think that what they're trying to do is show you that this church is very intimate. It's very small. And in the smallness of this church, your faith is closer to you. You're closer to those statues. You're closer to the altar. You're closer. Think about some of the buildings that we've done and how far away. Think about Chartres. Think about sitting at the back of Chartres and how far away from everything you are. Right? Because it's a huge space. This is a much smaller space. When you go in there to worship, you are right there. And you are surrounded by your faith. And so that bigger is not necessarily better during Baroque construction. And this one, that wave brings that idea of nature and what God created, water and light, and brings it into the very small space. And I think that's why they chose this one. Okay, so there you go. All right, this is the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Okay, and we need to talk a little bit about this. All right, we have to remember that when we're dealing with the Baroque era, we're dealing with moments where the divine enters the everyday, moments where the sacred or miraculous can take place. Saint Teresa was a nun who said that she had an experience where an angel came down and pierced her heart with the flaming arrow of God's love. And she said that the pain was great and yet sweet, and brought her into an ecstasy with God. And what we have to think about is the definition of that word ecstasy. What does ecstasy mean? Ecstasy means an overwhelming feeling of happiness or joy, an emotional or religious frenzy, okay, involving transcendence. That's what ecstasy means, okay? Ecstasy in this definition is the moment that Saint Teresa has an overwhelming feeling of joy and religious frenzy at a moment of transcendence where the sacred enters the everyday. And what you see in the statue is the angel piercing her heart with the divine love of God. That is what this statue is. And if there was ever a Baroque image, ever, this is like the most Baroque statue. Like Caravaggio is the most Baroque painting. And this piece is the most Baroque statue. It is literally, you see the rays of God coming down. You see, we're going to talk about light in a second. But this statue is giant. And her face, you see that moment where she has both intense pain and joy, and the angel reflecting on her, that presence in that moment of God. It's a powerful, powerful image. And remember, we're doing the Baroque. So we're doing, things that appeal to the senses. We're doing this idea of this amazing moment. So let's go back to the front so that you can get your writings down here. So this is located in Cornaro Chapel, which is a small side chapel in the Santa Maria della Vittoria in Rome. Okay, so it's in a small side chapel in a much larger church. And what you have to understand is in this little time, I mean, that's it, that you see the whole chapel there. And it allows for mass to be said at this very small chapel. This is the altar. You could worship right here at this rail. That image of Saint Teresa, the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, it is right there. And it makes it, it makes it personal. It personalizes that faith. Remember the idea of Baroque, that intense emotion. It is, by having it be that close to you, you are part of it. And remember, it's involving the individual. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I don't know. It's just, that's what this is. So who is Bernini? Bernini's a big guy, important guy here. Bernini builds some really important stuff for the Vatican. And he was deeply, deeply, deeply religious, like deeply religious. He's probably the most religious of all of our artists that we have seen in the Baroque. So, while the Protestants are arguing that your personal relationship with God doesn't have to be some big pomp and circumstance thing, the Catholic Church, doubles down on this idea of ceremony and pomp and circumstance. And the relationship between God and man in Bernini's eyes was a miraculous thing. And so the art had to show that miraculous moment of the relationship between God and man. Now, what you also need to know is that Bernini, in addition to being very religious, he wrote plays and designed sets. And so what he does is he takes his art and his set design and he makes this amazingly artistic, powerful statue that feels like it's part of a much larger lesson. And it's because it is. When you look at this, you see, his love of God is over the top in the way that you would expect a Broadway play to have an over the top set. And he does this for the glory of God. He treats the whole space like it is part of one set piece. It's marble and it's brass and it's gold and it's light and it's crazy. So when you look at, this is the front of the church. The front of the church does not seem to have that same religious fervor, but it's not as wacky as, the other one, Il Jesu. This is like a much smaller, more intimate. We come back to that intimate, okay? So when we get into our statue of Saint Teresa, you really are looking at the sculptural interpretation of what she wrote about in her diary. She wrote about visions of God. She wrote about visions of angels. And she wrote about this particular moment where the angel stabs her with the light of God. But look at this statue. Look at her dress versus the angel's clothing. Look at how her nun's habit looks thicker and heavier. And look at how the clothing on the angel looks light and airy. It is the difference between the earthly and the divine, right? Even the clothing looks different. And it's the same, they're in the same moment, but this is her earthly body and her earthly clothes. And this is the angelic body and the angelic clothes. Now, behind you, you have these beautiful rays of God's light. Now, what you don't know about this amazing rays of God's light in bronze behind you is that right above this statue, Bernini hid basically a skylight. There's a window right above the statue so that when you are looking at it, right back here, there's like a window right up here. And light comes in and she is lit with not only, like now she's lit with artificial light, but she would have been lit at the time with natural light that would have come in from that window above. And talk about feeling like this idea of religious transcendence. You're looking at a time when everything would have been lit by candles. And you walk into this, this church and she's lit by this glowing outdoor light. She and the angel are both carved from a single block of marble. So he started with one single block of marble and carved them out of a single block of marble. And when you're looking at all of this stuff, we see right up here in this fresco above is the dove of peace. And so you see her bathed in the light with real light, the angel, the heavy drapery and the angel's light drapery, sorry. And if there was ever a Baroque sculpture, this is it. This is the one. I mean, it is the strongest example of what Baroque means in sculpture. Okay. I'm a fan, as you can clearly tell. All right. And I just love the difference in the light and airiness of his robes versus the heaviness of her robes. And the clearly humanness of her face and the angelicness of his face. It's just lovely. I'm a big fan. All right. Now we're going to switch to Las Meninas. And Las Meninas is really awesome, which is it's Spanish Baroque. And it is, again, an appeal to your senses and an appeal to make you part of the scene. But what's cool about this one is this is non-religious painting. So they want to let you see religious and non-religious art. And so what you're looking at here in Las Meninas is it is Diego Velázquez, and I don't know why his name is on two lines now. It's the way it came in. Diego Velázquez, oil on canvas. Look at how giant this is, 10.5 feet by 9 feet. It's giant. It's huge. This is a huge painting that has images of the Spanish royal family, King Philip IV, And we see sort of the Spanish royal family and some of the people involved in the court, the Spanish court. And so at the center here, excuse me, of the picture, excuse me, I'm just going to tell you who's in it, and then we're going to talk about why we have it. So in the center here, you see the Infanta. That's what the princess is called, the Infanta. And you could literally just call her that. But her name is Donna Margarita Maria of Austria. And the reason for that is through marriage and stuff like that. And so you see her, and you see that she is standing with Las Meninas. What are Las Meninas? Ladies in Waiting. That is what the title of this piece is, Ladies in Waiting. And so you see her standing here. She's 5 or 6. Actually, it's a funny story is Velázquez loved painting her and painted her many, many times. But here she is. She's looking just so cute and lovely and fantastic. And then what you see to her left are her ladies in waiting, the Las Meninas. That's really what this is supposedly about, is about the ladies in waiting, but it's about so much more than that. And so you see her 2 ladies in waiting, one holding out a silver jug to her, the other in mid curtsy. They're dressed very nicely. They have beautiful butterflies in their hair and beautiful pins and decorations. They're very well loved because they are friends of or companions of the Infanta, the princess. You also see over here this woman. Her name is Mary Barbola, and she was a member of the court that just sort of was involved in doing entertainment, along with the court jester. That's who this little kid is, the court jester, Nicholas, and then their dog, their family dog. Okay, just behind you, you see a nun who is in conversation with one of like the royal guards. And so what you're seeing is just sort of a simple genre piece. You're just looking at, these people. So the princess, her ladies in waiting, members of the royal court, nun and a royal guard. Okay, back here in the door, this is back in the door is a man that most believe to be his name is Jose Nieto Velázquez, but not related to Diego Velázquez. And it is believed that he was the Queen's Chamberlain, so sort of head of the Queen's household and things like that, like the stuff that the Queen ran. And so that's who you see back there. But then even more interesting, or what I think most interesting, is the mirror. That's a mirror. And in the mirror, we see King Philip and Queen Mariana. Okay. And that is very cool because that puts us, okay, because this is a mirror. So it would be reflecting. So that puts us next to, with the king and queen. And it's like we have walked in on Velázquez painting the little princess and her court. And here's the mirror where we have walked in, and this is the artist. This is Velázquez. And this is Velázquez, the artist, painting this scene that we're looking at. So what it's so crazy. It's like the Matrix. What we're looking at is the back of the painting that we're currently looking at. And we are kind of in this painting because what has happened is the king and queen have walked into the studio while Velázquez is painting it, and everyone has turned to look at us. It's really cool. Velázquez and the king were friendly. It was not unusual for the king to stop by while Velázquez was painting any number of portraits of members of the household. So, we just walk into this very simple moment. And that makes it a big deal. It's not a standard portrait. And the reason that it's not a standard portrait is we are part of the portrait. Everyone is looking at us. And we are standing with the king and queen, but because of where we're standing, we're not pictured in the mirror. The mirror catches the king and queen, but not us. Velázquez has painted himself into the portrait, which is also very cute. So, he paints himself in, and and that cross that's on the front of his shirt is actually a knighthood that he actually gets a few years later. He actually hadn't gotten the knighthood yet, which is amazing. So he paints himself with a knighthood on there with the hopes that when the king sees it, he'll be like, yes. So he's actually knighted in 1659 after the completion of this, and he does get the knighthood, which is adorable. And so we've entered into this monumental canvas. It's a huge canvas. We've entered into this giant canvas, and we've entered into what is very much not present in a lot of paintings at this time. And this is why Las Meninas is a big deal, is because we've entered into a painting that we feel we have caught everyone off guard. Every other painting we usually do feels like it is capturing a moment purposefully. Sorry, I had to get some tea. This doesn't feel like that. We have stumbled into a portrait in process, and people are paying attention to various things. The nun and the royal guard are talking to each other. The Infanta, he's clearly painting her, but she's turned away from him. And we've walked in and everyone is turned to look at us. It has a sense of naturalism. It feels real. It has a sense of spontaneity. It feels accidental. And it feels so different from every other painting in that it feels like it is capturing a moment that is not necessarily like a really important moment. And you have to remember that the ability to capture a spontaneous event doesn't happen for another 200 years with the camera. So the idea that Velázquez would paint this painting of a moment, it is just it's so unusual, and that is why it is such a big deal. And it's just so. I think that because we have photos and because we have, phones that can take pictures of anything we want to take pictures of, we forget how big a deal it was to have a portrait painted. And people would sit for days and days and days for them. And the idea that Velázquez would take a spontaneous moment and devote a 9-foot by 10.5-foot canvas to this spontaneous moment is really, really cool. And the pictures in the background are famous pictures by other artists. So, which is great. The king, King Philip IV, was actually a huge fan of Rubens, who did the Marie de Medici cycle. And these are actually pieces painted by Rubens, by Peter Paul Rubens, that were part of the king's personal collection. So we see 2 paintings by Peter Paul Rubens in the background that Velázquez has painted into his own painting. I mean, like I said, it's a little bit like being in the Matrix. And it's a very famous work. And then when you scroll in, you can see like there's the king and queen, and there's the Infanta, and there are their little, all of these little dots of white paint that give the painting that glow. And everything is just, it seems to be catching if you want to know exactly who people are and a little more about them, we have all of this stuff here. So what I wanted to show you one more thing is this is the actual painting, and we'll talk about Cubism at some point, and we'll get to Picasso, but this is Picasso's version of this painting. And it's really, it's a really, really the word is watershed. It's a moment that is really important. It changes time, because of it changes painting. It is deciding to take a moment that doesn't seem as posed, and make it important. So that is Las Meninas. That is our last video for today. I will see you again next time with our last video of the Baroque. So I'll see you then. I hope you learned something. Bye, guys.